Welcome to
Crazy, right?
A podcast
Be your own person.
for those affected by
Crazy, right?
mental health,
I wanted to just try it.
Crazy,
It's something that I've struggled with for a while.
featuring live improvised music
Now I finally got my head right again.
by your host,
am I right? Crazy,
It feels good to talk about it.
right? Crazy, right?
Dave Asher.
My guest today is Jam Alker, a leader in the Recovery Through Music movement. Following a battle with several addictions, including heroin, Jam returned to his musical roots and used songwriting and expressive therapy to improve his life, and has gained a large following in the process, inspiring others and showing them a light to guide their own paths to wellness. Jam, thank you for joining me here today in my studio. I'm going to step over here to my piano. You got clean for good 5 years ago, is that correct?
Correct.
And would you take me to maybe the 6 months of your life leading up to that?
The first step, which I like to refer to as my moment of clarity rather than my bottom, happened before that 5-year period. It was somewhere between 6 and 7 years ago. I'm not incredibly good at math, but I found out that I was going to have a child. And I thought that that was going to be the thing that would get me to stop. My child was born less than 2 weeks later. I was on the west side of Chicago buying heroin. It was at that moment that I had my moment of clarity and knew that I needed to stop. It took an additional 20 months from that moment for me to finally completely surrender and check myself into a treatment center. And that period of time between the moment of clarity that I needed to reach out for help and finally taking that help was utter hell, was the worst time of my life, knowing that I was helpless, knowing that there were no more lines in the sand to draw. I knew if this thing didn't stop me, I had this infant child at home and I was still, shooting heroin. But I wasn't able to stop. And I kept trying and trying and trying. And so that period of, over 20 months between the moment of clarity and when I actually stopped was a lot of still trying to hold on to my will and figure out ways to stop until I finally did surrender and check myself into treatment 5 years ago.
You use that expression, holding on to your will. Do you feel that there is a flaw in holding on to your own will and a benefit to turning over your own will to someone else or something else's control?
I do, in the case when you come to the realization that you are up against a superior foe. When your way of doing things clearly does not work. All evidence points to the contrary, that your answer is not the answer. I am well aware that the success that I have today is not based off of me doing things my way. Left to my own devices, I would most likely be dead on the west side of Chicago. I would not be traveling the country using music as a healing modality to help people who are in their addiction or looking for inspiration in their recovery. So as that is the case, with my recovery, I had to surrender. I had to let go of my way of doing it, let go of my will in terms of the way that I was trying to defeat this superior foe, and again, follow the direction of those who had what I wanted.
I am imagining you were a musician before it became part of your mission of recovery, is that correct?
Yes.
What was your first exposure to music like, either as a listener or as a performer?
As a listener, early on, I got albums from my dad, like the Rolling Stones and the Beatles and things like that. And so my early exposure to music was some amazing rock and roll. My exposure to playing happened in my teens, and it was really, I knew that there was some creative element to myself that I was trying to explore, and I also think that I was using it as a way not only to express myself, but probably to get some attention. In other words, chicks dig musicians. So that was part of it, for attention. I realize now that that was another form of addiction or attachment, was looking for that sort of attention and validation from females. I didn't really have it from my mom when I was a kid, sort of linking it back to some of the childhood trauma. But anyway, that was my first exposure to music. Was I started picking up a guitar when I was in my teens. And yes, I had a music career to some degree in my 20s, certainly not at the level of success that I'm experiencing now, but I played in bands. I did some touring, made some albums, and did all of the crazy hedonistic things that go along with that, and again, other manifestations of my addiction. And that all ended at about the age of 30 when I was finally introduced to heroin, which is the thing that brought me to my knees. And once heroin became the center of my world, music fell away. So while I had this interesting music career in my 20s, once I hit my 30s and found heroin, I almost never picked up a guitar. I stopped writing, and it became less and less important to me as my addiction took over. And the things that I had gained in my life, I had a recording studio, I had a record label, I had some property. I was doing really well. I've talked about it. At 30 years old, I was close to being a millionaire. I had toured the country, played in front of thousands of screaming fans, had a record label, had a recording studio, and I became a heroin addict with all of that quote unquote material success, because I was still miserable on the inside, and because I was using all of those things to try to fill that hole that existed inside of me, not knowing that I had to shine the light inward, which I didn't learn until I went to treatment. I was still under the impression that these different material successes would somehow be able to fill that, for lack of a better term, spiritual hole that existed inside of me.
You said that when you were a child, you feel like music and a desire to receive attention from women, you associated that with a connection with your relationship with your mother. Whether or not you wanted to get into that specifically about with your mother, well, my mother passed when I was 18, and it took a while. A lot of my over the years, a lot of my getting sick with mania and also drug abuse triggering that mania even further has often been connected to that experience of losing my mother at a relatively young age. Would you be willing to share a little bit about what your relationship with your mother was like as a child that you feel was, if I'm imagining, not giving you a sense of validation that led you to seek it from other women?
Absolutely. When I was 5 years old was when the last of the sort of happy childhood memories occurred. I was living out in the desert of Arizona with my brother, my mother, and my father, and some of my early memories before that are of my mom smashing a whiskey bottle over my dad's head to stop his violent advances. Shortly after that, she put me and my brother in a car and took us to Las Vegas, and I don't know how long it was before I saw my father again. Once we got to Vegas, we moved into this terrible little apartment complex where she took a job as a cocktail waitress at a shitty little casino right on the strip there. And I was left on my own, no father. My mother wasn't around. It was not a great neighborhood. I talk about, one of my next memories is I like to ask people, do you remember your first kiss? And I usually hear pretty sweet stories about a person's first kiss. And my first kiss was in that apartment complex at 6 years old. I was kissed by a prostitute for some reason. A prostitute who lived in the complex thought it would be a good idea that I experience my first kiss with her. Shortly after that, she married another violent alcoholic man, moved us in with him. As his violence continued, rather than her taking me and my brother and leaving as she did with my father, she stayed with him and put my brother and I on a Greyhound bus to go back and live with my father. That was when I was 8 years old, and from 8 years old until 15 years old, I think I saw my mom twice in those, critical years of development. And so I lacked a mother's love, I lacked a mother's attention, I lacked that female or feminine figure in my life for all of those years. And what I know now, after doing a lot of therapy and doing a lot of work in my recovery, is that whatever hole that created inside of me, that I tried to fill that hole once I got into my teens with attention and love from as many different girls as I possibly could. Regardless of how I manipulated them, regardless of what I told them, regardless if I was dating one and another one showed me a minute amount of attention, I didn't care. I did whatever I could to really sort of get my fix. But it was never enough. It was never enough. So I think that there's a connection there between when I started playing music and saw that I did get a little bit of attention from some girls. It wasn't the only motivation, but it was certainly one of the motivations early on for me to start playing, because I knew it would be a way that I could, quote unquote, get chicks.
Since getting clean, are you currently
Yeah, I'm married.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And you mentioned you had a child about 5 or 6 years ago.
Yes.
Is that child in your care?
Yes. I have an amazing relationship with my family now. The amends have been made. The living amends have been made. Walking the walk rather than talking the talk. And I am absolutely blessed in the relationship that I have with my family today.
And do you have other children as well now?
Just one. A beautiful 6-year-old daughter.
And your partner now, is that the mother of your daughter?
Yes, her and I, she was with me through the vast majority of my addiction. I will say my deep addiction and how it presented with heroin, which became the thing that brought me to my knees. She was there from almost the very beginning of that, when I was still early in it and very much able to hide it. And she stuck with me through the entirety of the active addiction.
Have you ever written songs about your partner?
I wrote a song when I was in treatment that actually was on my first album called Weather the Storm, which is about that concept of living amends. When my life really started to change was when I was in treatment. I brought my acoustic guitar with me, which was my last worldly possession in terms of musical instruments. Everything else I had pawned in my addiction for heroin. But I kept this one guitar, and I took the guitar with me when I went to treatment. And when I was in treatment is when I began to write again. And I used that as a way to start to process all of that underlying trauma that I had been storing and not processing, and had been, what I know now was very much of the fuel for the continuation of the guilt and the shame and the other negative and uncomfortable feelings that I used heroin to numb myself to. So I knew when I went to treatment that I had to get to the causes and conditions. You know as well as I do that recovery is not about stopping using drugs and alcohol. Recovery is about getting to, peeling back the layers of the onion, getting to whatever is the underlying trauma, whatever it might be, and starting to learn how to process it and heal it. And so when I got to treatment with this guitar, my counselor, Nanette, God bless her soul, one day made a suggestion that maybe I do some of my treatment work as songwriting. And I hadn't written a song for so many years, but I picked up the guitar, I opened myself up to that power greater than myself, and I often say that thing manifested to me through music. It's like an old radio that finally was tuned into the right frequency, and this music started to pour through me. So the combination of what I feel as that spiritual experience happening to me through music, and also using writing as my form of processing and healing in treatment, is when my life truly started to change. And so 3 of the songs on my first album I wrote while I was there in treatment. And one of the things that they ask you to do when you're in treatment is to start thinking about the amends you're going to have to make with your loved ones. And so as I thought about that, I sat down specifically with regards to this song that was written for and about my wife. And I wrote the song Weather the Storm, which is really about, the crux of the song is that I needed to allow her to be as angry as she needed to be, as hurt as she needed to be, as distrustful, as spiteful as she needed to be, not just once when I got out, but for as long as she needed to be. The worst thing that I could do was say, but look, I've been in recovery for 2 months now, never mind what I did for the 10 years before that. Me expecting her to not be able to not give her the opportunity to go through her healing experience. I was told again by people far smarter than me and those who had what I wanted, that the best way to handle that, if I truly wanted this relationship, was going to be to allow her, the words that I used in the song was to allow her to be the storm, and that I would weather the storm. So the song Weather the Storm on my first album was written with that in mind.
Is this a song that you would be willing to share some of with us live here?
Sure. My voice isn't warmed up, so I'm not going to make any guarantees on how I'm going to sound, but I'll give it a shot. Scream, cry, breathe fire, treat me with silence and trip me with guilt. And I will stand still, see, leave. Don't believe, push me away and hold me at bay, and I will stand day after day, day after day. Spit thunder, spit lightning, spit all of your scorn, and I promise you that I will weather the storm.
So that storm, I love that song. When you shared that song with her, what was that experience like? Did you share a recording of it with her? Did you tell her about it? Did you just release it, and does she know there is a song about her? The Weather the Storm song is directed towards her, and you giving her permission in your mind to be as angry or scornful or silent or mean towards you?
Sure. The day that I got home from treatment, I sat down with the guitar. I mean, I left treatment on fire for my recovery and finally realizing my purpose in life, that I had to go through all of the pain that I went through in order to reach the lows that I did, and then be able to use music as a way to heal. And I had already seen in treatment with the way that I had shared some of these songs with the folks in my unit, how it was helping them to be able to find some of the words they hadn't been able to find. And I knew that this was a way I could be of service. You know, another thing you learn in recovery is that being of service to others is hugely important. So I left on fire knowing that my purpose was to use music as a way to help others. And so I got home that day and I wrote 5 songs while I was there in treatment. I sat down that day and I played all 5 songs for her. 2 days later, I saw my therapist for the first time. I brought my guitar with me. I was like, look what I did. Look what's happening with me. So the answer to your question is yes. I sat down with her on day 1. I played that song. It was an incredibly healing moment. There were a lot of tears on both of our parts. I'm not sure if even to this day that she doesn't get a tear anytime I play that song. You know, we play some, you know, relatively decent-sized concerts these days, and even in front of those kind of crowds, she knows that song is for her. And, you know, the fans or the supporters that I have all pretty much know that as well. And it was a very emotional and healing experience between the two of us. And it's just another example and a testament to how music can be such a powerful tool for healing.
I noticed as well that you have a song called Heal. Is that correct?
Yeah.
But that was not written that's not one of those first 5 songs.
Correct.
Is that one you would be willing to play now as well?
Man, I'm not even sure that I remember how to play it. And
let's try this.
All right.
Let's play it together and try and rediscover the essence of what the song is about, but kind of re-improvise the words. So like, let's pick a key and do kind of a bluesy kind of rock and roll vibe.
Go to that D. 5/4. Come on, raise your hands in the air. I said, raise your hands in that air. Yeah. Show the people. Yeah. Well, I said, raise your scars in the air. Let the people know that you've been there. Raise your scars in the air. Let the people know. I said, raise your scars in the air. Let the people know that you've been there. So I'ma care. Get it.
I've got some scars to share. I'm gonna raise my scars up in the air. Gonna tell the people where I went wrong. Gonna share my scars with them in this song.
I said, raise your scars in the air. Let the people know that you've been there. Raise your scars in the air. Let the people know you care. And raise your scars in the air. Let the people know that you've been there. Let them know you care. Get it. The struggle is real.
Word. Okay.
That's yeah, I've not done much kind of improv kind of stuff like that. I think that that is a whole different skill.
When you're writing a song, process-wise, are you going from idea to lyrics to music, or is it oftentimes other order of operations?
It's never the same. It's crazy. Sometimes just a melody will come in my head, and I'll try to put that into some find music that goes with the melody, and then words will just come to me. Sometimes, a lot of times, if I'm flying, I'll write a lot of lyrics on planes that don't have anything that goes with it, and I'll go back to those. Sometimes if I've just come up with an idea, or I'll hear something else cool, just something will pop into my head, and I'll start writing a riff, and then music or words will come after it. Sometimes I can just sit down with a guitar with a certain feeling and something just completely pours out of me that I don't even know where it came from. I don't have a process, and every time that I've tried to follow a formula or a process, it's always turned out crap. It always comes out sounding very manufactured. So I wish I could say that I did have a process, because it would be a lot easier than I could just follow that process, but I have no idea how it works.
Would you take me a little bit on the journey of the last 5 years as far as your career developing, being an asset to people? And please feel free to keep jamming along. I'm just gonna riff around here and see, I guess. The process, the story of going from discovering the value of music as therapy and personal recovery, and coming to a point where you are now sharing your story with people through music and also as an artist brand. What is the path you took to get from the origin of that to now a record deal?
Right. It's really hard to pinpoint exactly how it happened. If I tried to map it out, it wouldn't have turned out anywhere close to the way it did. What I can say about it is that as I mentioned before, when I left treatment, I knew that my path was using music as a way to help others to heal from their addictions. How that was going to happen, I didn't know, but I just knew that that was everything to me. So, early on, I got asked at some of these 12-step fellowship meetings to share my story, and if anybody asked me to share my story, I would tell them that a big part of my story is music. So if you want me to speak, expect me to bring my acoustic guitar with me, and I'm going to play a couple songs as part of my story. And I think that was the first piece of it. And then when I was in treatment and I was writing these songs, 3 or 4 of the guys in my unit came up to me and shared poetry that they wrote with me after they had heard what I was doing. And it was 3 guys, and 2 of the 3 had never written poetry before. And in each case, they asked me if I wanted to use their poems and turn it into music, that I could. At the time, I was very early on and was like, no, I write my own stuff. Thank you, though. But when I left, I realized what an opportunity that was, that what I had done had inspired them to write something. And imagine if I had just taken the poetry and even put, some 1, 4, 5 chords behind it and a little bit of a melody, what that could have done to maybe, help to show them how creativity could continue to help them. So I thought it'd be cool to make a workshop and take it into treatment centers. I met an amazing clinician who I brought the idea to, and she had done music groups in the past. She said, rather than just doing a little workshop, why don't we collaborate and create a curriculum that we can take into treatment centers? So that was another one of those moments where over the course of the next month or 2, we created a 6-week curriculum based off of that music I wrote early in my recovery. We began to take that in to treatment centers and detoxes. That was sort of the next phase of things. I continued to write. I was doing that. I was just continuing to find my way, not worried about money or success, just really wanting to help people. And continued to write. All of a sudden realized I had about an album's worth of stuff. Made some demos, released one online to the recovery community. It kind of took fire. Got a lot of amazing comments from people all over the world, really. People reaching out from Australia, Europe, people who are still struggling, parents of kids who are still struggling, looking for inspiration. So I saw that I had an opportunity to help here. After I finished the album's worth of material, I decided to make an album. I put the album together. That took things to the next level. I put the band together. In that time, I got an opportunity to start working in the treatment field. I now work with Recovery Unplugged, which is the preeminent music-based treatment center in the country. We just opened a location in Nashville. We have one in Austin. It's co-owned by one of the guys from Aerosmith. Music is a part of every aspect of healing. I work with them. After the album came out, I put the band together, more success, which turned into this amazing band that I have. We just recorded our first album together as the full band. We got the deal with Sony. We're about to tour the world. I have this documentary that's being filmed. I don't know how it happened from where I was 5 years ago to where I am now, other than knowing what my path and my purpose was and following it with every ounce of my heart and soul, not caring anymore if I ever made any money or had any fame. I just truly wanted to use it as an opportunity to help others. And I think that when you do that sort of a thing, when you're in rhythm with the universe, when you're in line, when you're flowing with rather than against, things begin to happen in really miraculous ways. These are things that I would hear spiritual teachers talk about or motivational leaders talk about forever and ever, and it never made sense to me. But I think it didn't make sense to me because I didn't know what my purpose was. And once I found it and started to follow it with every ounce of my soul, these things really just started to manifest in my life. Now, I will also say that it has been a ton of work. I am very, very dedicated. I do these speaking events all over the country. I have the music career. I work with the treatment center. I have the documentary. That music group that I told you about that started in detoxes is in the process of being turned into a curriculum that's going to be sold to therapists and clinicians all over the country. I have these amazing successes happening, but they're happening because I am in my purpose and because I work my ass off every day to make sure that I manifest the shit out of this second chance that I got. By all rights, I should be dead. I shouldn't be here sitting with you right now. I've been given a second chance, and I've been given a purpose, and it's a pure purpose, one in which I am there to be of service to my fellow man. And I do not take that lightly. And so I've done everything in my power to be able to make those dreams come true.
Jam, thank you so much for sharing your story with me. I hope you'll come back at some point, man.
I would love to.
Thank you again to my guest, Jam Alker. His new album, Sophrosony, is available now. For more information, including how to follow and connect with Jam, visit jamalker.com. All the best, Jam, and continued success. That wraps up this episode of Crazy Right with Dave Asher. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider writing a review or rating this podcast. And of course, we would love it if you subscribe. I'm Dave Asher, and I'm glad to be here.